When it comes to creating a pair of cartoon custom sneakers, what you're essentially trying to do is capture an illusion that will trick your audience. You want the shoes themselves to almost look like they could be an illustration. And I think the best ones can even start to blur the reality of what appears to be a 2D object in a 3D space. And today I'm going to show you the steps that you'll need to take in order to get there. So for today's video, I'll be using a Jordan 1 Low as our base, and anytime I don't already have a theme in mind or a color palette I plan on using, I like to head over to Google Images and just search up color palettes, and you'll find tons of inspiration. Here's the two different palettes that caught my eye, and I'll be using one of these on each of the shoes. If you're working with a base shoe that isn't already all white to start, such as this one, lay down some light gray followed by mist as your base coats. Then we can start laying down some of our main colors that we've mixed together based off our color palette and the mock-ups that I've pieced together. Each of your colors should take you somewhere right around 4 to 6 coats to make them nice and solid. After we have all of our main color blocking complete, the next thing we need to do is start sketching out where we want to place all of our shading. This style of shading that we're going to be doing today is commonly referred to as cell shading or toon shading. And the general idea behind this method is that you shade and highlight with chunky, flat, simplified colors rather than the subtle gradients that you would see in real life. Even if you're not familiar with it by name, this is certainly a style of artwork that you've seen before in some of your favorite cartoons or anime. So to start sketching some of this line work, I'm going to be using one of my Frixion pens, which actually has a thermosensitive ink, so any line work that we can't cover up with paint, we can easily erase it just by applying heat. As far as determining where to place your lines, a guideline you could follow would be to just match the natural contours of the panels themselves. But of course, feel free to take liberties and start to add in curves in areas that you think might need some. We're going to be painting black lines around all of the panels themselves along with the stitching, so I'm accounting for all of that also here with where I'm placing my lines. Now to actually paint this shading effect, we're going to need slightly darker variations of each of our main colors that we've already laid down. The simple blanket answer on how to darken any color is to just add black. But I want you to know there's more than one way you can do this, especially since black can really remove a lot of the richness and vibrancy of your colors. Some of the other options that you can use are dark neutral colors such as dark grays or browns. Or you can try adding some of the complementary color to whatever you're working with, which is just the opposite color on the color wheel. So if you take a look at this chart here, you'll see that by slowly mixing in some of the complementary color, not only will it darken the color that you're working with, but it will also tone down the overall intensity of it. But don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of times where I'll just mix in a few drops of black to whatever color I'm working with in order to darken it up a bit. Color mixing tends to be something that isn't very black and white, no pun intended, but it does absolutely get easier the more you do it and the more you experiment with it. So if you take this coral color, for example, I'm going to be mixing in a couple of drops of dark gray in order to darken it just a tad. When it comes to your highlight colors, these are even easier to do because in almost all situations, all you need to do is add in some white. The key thing that we're going for here with all of these different shades that we're creating is just a subtle difference between the main color that we've already laid down and all of these new shades that we're creating. Those very subtle effects of having those darker shades for your shadows and those lighter shades for your highlights are what's really going to help sell this illusion. Now for my weapon of choice to do our shading, I'm going to be using a size 0 shader, and this is going to help me achieve those really nice consistent line weights throughout. Then we can grab our shading color and it's time to just start coloring inside the lines. On average, this is going to take you somewhere right around 3 coats to get those shadow and highlight colors packed in. You can be a little bit looser and more free with some of your line weights on some of the preliminary coats, but we're going to go back and make sure that we fine tune all of these down the line. Getting back into some color mixing, I have this yellow on one of my toe boxes, and this is one of those situations where rather than adding black into my color, I'll experiment with adding neutrals, such as a little bit of beige and a couple of drops of brown to this yellow. After we've done all of our shadows and highlights, we can erase any of those pen lines that we have left behind by applying our heat gun directly to those areas. Okay, now here's the part that takes your cartoon customs from looking like just a fun beginner project to actually looking like they were made by a professional or came from a factory, or even better yet, are actually a part of an illusion. You need to have the willingness to go back and actually create precise, consistent line weights throughout. I'm still using that same size 0 shader brush from earlier, but now I'm going back even slower and trying to follow the exact curve or contour of the panel that I'm working on. If the width of this line is a 1/4 inch, for example, I want it to be that same exact width all the way around. If you need to go back and grab some of the original color because you extended your new lines too far, then be willing to do that. Those little details that you think nobody will ever notice are what's going to make your work so much more accurate and professional looking. Our next step is going to be to do black outlines around each of our individual panels. In order to do that, I'm going to be switching over to a size 0 round brush now. For this technique, we're going to paint right up to the stitching on each of our panels. This black's gonna cover up super easy in just 1 or 2 light coats. Then, like a wise man once said, say your prayers, eat your vegetables, and always, always paint your edges. That size 0 round brush makes this step so much easier. Following the stitching makes this part super simple and removes almost all of the guesswork involved. Just like I mentioned earlier, accuracy and precision are what's going to give you the cleanest look here and really help sell the illusion on these. I recommend trying to get comfortable with using your pinky as a brace and guide to really help control your brush as you're trying to get into some of those harder to reach edges. I also want to add an additional black line right above our midsole all the way around the entire shoe. Give yourself a couple passes to go back and make this line as straight as possible since you're essentially going to be freehanding this one. And you don't need to worry too much about getting any paint on the midsole here since that's a really easy fix. All you need to do is once that paint is dry, you can scrape it right off with a toothpick. Then hit it with a glue and residue eraser to grab anything that might be left behind. And if you have any really stubborn areas where you just can't seem to get something off the midsole, you can always dip a Q-tip in a little bit of acetone to try to rub that right off. Then we're gonna hit this entire project with a matte finisher throughout. My current favorite ones are the Angelus Matte Forecoat or the Liquid Kicks Matte Top Coat. But then something else you wanna do is get creative with your content surrounding a project like this. You want to pick the right angles and background that will really help sell the illusion of your piece. If you're interested in seeing how I dyed the midsole stitching on these, which I believe is another key factor to really helping sell that cartoon effect, go ahead and click this video that we have over here. Or if you're interested in seeing any of our other tutorials, go ahead and click this playlist that we have up here. Alright guys, everybody get out there and just create.